A Supreme Court ruling that says frozen embryos can be considered children under state law.
It comes after a group of patients filed wrongful death suits after another patient allegedly destroyed their frozen embryos by dropping them. Experts say the controversial ruling leaves many questions for IVF clinics and their patients.
Let's try and dig into some of those questions this morning. We have Dr. Lucky Seekon joining us on set. She's a double board certified REI and OBGYN at RMA of New York Fertility Clinic. We also have NBC News Now legal analyst Angela Senadella here as well.
That's right. Thank you both for joining us. Dr. Seekon, I'll start with you. I mean, I know that much of your work is in a fertility clinic. I'm just wondering your reaction to this, first of all. Were you surprised? What do you make of this?
I was surprised because this seemed to be like a civil matter where embryos are regarded as property, and you don't typically hear of embryos being regarded as minors or children. And my reaction was that this is problematic because we don't know how, if and how it could be applied to, how IVF is done in the state of Alabama, and we worry about the limitations that it could pose.
Let's talk about the legal stuff here. A lower court initially ruled no, a frozen embryo is not an actual person, but then the Alabama State Supreme Court says, yes, it is. What was the reasoning for the Alabama Supreme Court here, and what does this mean right now for people who want to get fertility treatment?
So even though this ruling said nothing to do with a parent's own rights over their own frozen embryos, I think that's where the biggest impact lies. Because as Dr. Seekon said, prior to this ruling, property under the eyes of the law was considered, frozen embryos were considered property under the eyes of the law. And that means that if somebody else accidentally or intentionally destroyed a frozen embryo, then you could sue for property damage. They could be prosecuted for property damage. But now, under this ruling, that property has become a human with the protections of the U.S. Constitution. That means literally your rights of what you can do with what was previously your own property have gone out the window, and they now have the rights of life, of liberty, and to be protected.
Dr. Seekon, obviously, many families have chosen to take this route. I mean, I'm personally interested in potentially freezing my eggs. I'm working on some stories on it right now. And it's a very common conversation that you start to recognize. You want to freeze your eggs if you have a partner. Do you want to freeze embryos? And you just kind of think of it as this step on the way to planning a family in the long term.
Yes.
So what does this mean for so many families and women who have taken this step? And how do you think this changes fertility treatments or conversations in doctors' offices?
Well, a lot of what we do is trying to overcome the inefficiency of human reproduction. And people who have gone through IVF and experts like myself who are very close to this know all too well that it's not a one-to-one ratio. Fertilized eggs don't always turn into a baby. A lot of eggs don't even turn into an embryo, and a lot of embryos don't have reproductive potential. And even if they're deemed to be healthy by genetic testing, many of them don't implant. So the whole purpose of IVF is it's a numbers game. You want to start off with as many as you possibly can in the hopes that you'll end up with at least one healthy embryo with reproductive potential. So the concern that a lot of patients in IVF centers in Alabama have is that if embryos are regarded as children, what does that mean? Are they going to be mandated potentially to keep them in storage indefinitely? That would drive up the cost of IVF, making it inaccessible. And will there be a tendency then to fertilize fewer eggs and drive down the success and increase the number of cycles that families need to build their families? We're trying to make IVF more accessible in our field, and this could have the opposite effect.
Absolutely.
Angela, there are people obviously who disagree with this ruling. What are their options now? Is this something that could end up before the U.S. Supreme Court, or where would this go from here?
Certainly they could petition, but the Supreme Court has a choice to either take it or not. And in this case, it's not clear that they will, because with Dobbs, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, each state now has the opportunity to determine where they believe personhood begins. And in the state of Alabama and in many others, they've determined it starts with fertilization. So at that point, states have their own jurisdiction.
So right now, this is just impacting Alabama. It wouldn't impact any other states, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Dr. Lucky Seekon, Angela Senadella, thank you both very much.